Hey HSM, Sarah here. Hey, when I was in college, I remember my peers constantly talking about themselves. And not just arrogantly or anything like that, but more from the standpoint of trying to better understand themselves. They would talk about their Myers-Briggs personality test, their Strengths Finders results, their Enneagram number, and even kind of the results of their love language tests. All those words that I said are different personality tests that help you understand yourself better and see how to engage with your relationships in the world better. The one that helped me in my relational world best was learning the love languages. Now, there are lots of different love languages. Have you heard of them before, right? A love language is how you feel most loved, how the people around you make you feel important, significant, and cherished. The love languages include acts of service, quality time, receiving gifts, physical touch, that's hard, and words of affirmation. So my top in love languages is quality time. I love quality time. Nothing makes me feel more special and chosen than a friend or family member specifically reaching out to me and asking if I'm free for plans on a specific date and time. Their intentionality makes me feel like they care about me and I matter to them. Isn't it true that we all want to feel that we matter? To matter means to be important, to be of significance. We live in a world today where so much of what we see people project on social media can often just scream,
"Someone value me. Someone make me feel like I matter."
There's a longing in our hearts to be significant. Now, I recognize not everyone uses the term, but sometimes a boyfriend or girlfriend or a husband or wife is referred to as a significant other. I think significant is maybe also a math term, but for many of us, learning math is useless because we have calculators and quickmath.com, or you're just like me and you're just bad at it. Let's look at this concept of significance by focusing on a story Jesus told in the Bible in Luke 15. He told a story about a man who had two sons. The younger of the two sons decided that he didn't want to live at home anymore. He even went beyond that, declaring that he wanted to completely cut off his family and run away forever. He asked his dad for his share of the family inheritance, which in those days was essentially telling his father that he wished he was dead. The younger son, for the sake of today, we'll call him Chris, took the money, grabbed all of his stuff, and traveled far away. Jesus continued the story saying that Chris went to crazy town. He straight up partied, raged constantly, and tried to satisfy his every desire. Then Chris came to a point where he ran out of money. To make things worse, there was also a major food shortage throughout the whole country. So Chris was in trouble. He had no money and was starving. He took a job literally feeding pigs and was so hungry that he wanted to eat the pigs' food but wasn't allowed to. At this point, even pigs were eating better than Chris. He tried to sneak some pigs' food, but the boss was always watching. Things were not going super well for Chris at all. Imagine being in that place. Finally, he came to his senses. He realized how foolish he was being and thought to himself, what in the world am I doing? Even my dad's servants get more food than they can eat, and here I am watching pigs eat. What am I thinking? So Chris decided to go home. He planned to tell his dad that he had sinned and admit that he was wrong. One of the hardest things to do. He'd asked if his dad could make him one of his servants because there was just no way he could ever be called his dad's son again. Chris messed up so bad that he felt that all he could do was throw himself at his dad's mercy and ask for the minimum so that he could survive. So Chris started his journey home. I'd like to imagine that he's like practicing his speech to his dad over and over again as he's walking home, right? When he passed the shepherds in the field, they probably looked at this like scraggly guy talking to himself and thought that he was insane. Chris kept his focus and kept going as a long trek home, but eventually he saw the family farm. Imagine that feeling of looking and seeing your family home. He saw the animals in the distance, the outline of the house and the barn on the horizon. As he got closer, he saw his dad was working outside. Dad noticed someone on the road and squinted to see who was coming. He thought it looked like Chris, but there's no way it could be, right? He had left. Eventually, his son came into focus, and Dad did something Chris never expected. With his heart full of compassion, he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and hugged him with the most loving embrace you could ever imagine. He even kissed his cheek and felt great relief that his son was alive. When this moment ended, Chris looked at his dad with his head down and said, "Dad, I was wrong. I sinned, and there's no excuse for what I did. I'm simply no longer worthy to be called your son." His dad gives him a confused look and shook his head. And then he yelled to his servants, saying, "Grab the best robe, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Do it quickly." And then he told some others, "Go and get the fattest calf you can find, because we're going to celebrate. My boy is home. He was lost and now he's found." Basically, the dad is yelling, "He's home! Let's party!" So then we kind of go to the other kid in the family. So there's two sons. The older son, who we will call Chad, because Chads are Chads, and this son was kind of a turd in the story, was working in the field while all this was happening. He approached the house to see what all the commotion was about. He heard music and dancing, and he asked one of the servants, "Hey, what's happening?" The servant replied, "Chad, your brother Chris is home. Your dad is having a feast for him because he's home safe and sound." So Chad, because we named him Chad, wasn't having it. He said,
"There's no way I'm going to that party."
His dad came out and said, "Come on, son, your brother's home. Let's celebrate." Chad was pissed. He said,
"Look, I've worked my tail off for you consistently over all these years. I always do what you ask. Despite this, you've never even thrown me a themed birthday party with my friends. Not even anything. Now Chris goes and blows all of his inheritance. He acts like a complete fool, doing worse things than you even want to think about. And you're going to throw him the best party ever."
His dad sighed, put his hands on Chad's shoulder, and he said, "My son, you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. But tonight we're celebrating because Chris was dead. He had left us forever, and now he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's found." Listen, guys, Chris thought he didn't matter anymore. He thought what he had done was too much to come back from. But he was wrong. He was always significant in his dad's eyes. And Chad was clearly jealous. He started to doubt his dad's love for him. But his dad also reminded him that he mattered too. There's a lot of things I love about this story. But what I really love is that Jesus never said that anyone in the story was wrong. He was clear that Chris, the older son, sinned. Sometimes some people pretend Chad, the older son, was so wrong. But Jesus didn't say that. It wasn't the point of the story. The point of the story is that both sons mattered. In the same way, you matter in God's story. So here's what all this means for you. First of all, there's a lot of feelings in this. So first of all, feelings are for information, not for direction. There's a lot of emotion in this story, like I just mentioned. And Chris chased his desires no matter how wrong they were, causing him to feel like he could never come home. The dad felt incredible love for his son and ran to him, which is significant because in that culture in that day, it was not normal for men to run. They didn't run for sport, and it was considered completely undignified. Yet, dad didn't care. And we can't forget that Chad had the jealousy that he felt over his brother getting special favor. In our lives, we're going to feel a lot of different things. Those feelings are important. They're not to be ignored. Feelings communicate important information to us and help us make informed decisions. The thing to know about feelings is that they are not meant to be for direction. Imagine if you only had to go to school when you felt like it. What if you decided to always eat whatever you wanted to or say whatever you felt like saying? Living that way would be a literal disaster. We should look to our feelings to inform our decisions, but not to make them. And part of this feelings talk is understanding that you matter even when you don't feel like it. In the same way that everyone in the story that Jesus told mattered. God has invited you into his story, and you matter in that story. Too often in this life, people convince themselves that they're just a bunch of cells that exist in a finite world. Some people believe that when they die, that's it. That's the end. They might convince themselves that nobody cares, and therefore they don't matter at all. And the result of this can be feelings of sadness, depression, or even thoughts of suicide. Your feelings should not drive your decisions. They should not determine your direction. Guys, they're not reliable and often cannot be trusted to communicate what's true. Feelings are there to be one of several factors that help you make decisions. Think about it. If Chris had not gone to his dad, he never would have known how loved he was. He would not have remembered that he mattered. Maybe recently your feelings have been just getting the best of you. Or even your feelings about yourself have been keeping you from God. And today you need a reminder that you're significant because God has created you. He knows you, he loves you, and you matter in his story. The next thing that we can take away from this story is that we see that Jesus takes the first step. Oh, I'm so grateful for this. Jesus takes the first step. It's easier for us to think that Jesus is distant, far off, like the dad in this story. We sometimes picture him waiting for us to run toward him, maybe with his arms crossed or with a scowl on his face, right? But as Willy Wonka said, strike that, reverse it.
We have to get on, we have so much time and so little to do. Strike that, reverse it. This way, please.
Jesus takes the first step. He actually runs towards us. In John 6, verse 44, Jesus said, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day." I love that. So beautiful. God draws us to himself. You know what that means? It means he takes the first step. He runs towards us, drawing us in. And much like the dad in the story, he gives us the biggest embrace the world has ever seen. Feelings are for information, not direction. No matter how we feel, it's still true that Jesus takes the first step. He's in pursuit of you. He's chasing you because you matter in his story. You matter so much that he wants you to know the truth. You are loved by God and significant in this world because he has called you significant. He runs towards you because you matter. In this world today, we believe God has called us to spread this message to others. It starts with you knowing that you matter in God's story. That means no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or what's been done to you, you are significant in his eyes. Jesus wants you to know your feelings are only part of the picture. Even when you don't feel it, it's still true that God has taken the first step towards you. He wants you to embrace your significance and the God who runs towards you. And once you've been gripped by this message, you get to help others know that they always matter. These others are not just your friends, but everyone. You're called to continually show others that they matter in God's story. We're calling this series You Belong Here because all of us matter. No matter where we are at with God, he has called us significant. You belong here in this place, in this world, in God's story. You belong. And belonging involves more than just you. Belonging means we get to invite others into our lives and into God's story. We get to show just how significant they are because of the God who made them, the fact that he loves them and runs towards them. It's a privilege, which is why we say we get to do this. We get to show others they belong, just like you and I do. So HSM, let's be people who embrace our significance in God's eyes. Let's believe that we matter in God's story, and let's help others do the same. Let's talk more about this in our groups.